We pride ourselves on being independent thinkers. We think our opinions on politics, on religion, on who the quote-unquote good guys and bad guys are, stem from our own rational brilliance.
Right, we think we're totally logical, we think we've looked at the data, but what if we haven't? What if a huge chunk of what we believe is just a collection of sentiments, essentially just feelings dressed up as facts that we've absorbed from the soil we live on or the group we hang out with?
And here is the scary part. What if those sentiments are actually limiting us? What if they are keeping us small, or even worse, making us dangerous to people who aren't in our little group?
That is the provocative, slightly terrifying, but ultimately incredibly liberating premise we are tackling today. We are exploring a worldview that says your intellect is trapped. It is currently locked in a cage made of narrow identities.
Yeah.
And the only way out, the only way to be truly free is to break those chains and expand your mind until it encompasses literally everything.
And when we say everything, we mean everything. We aren't just talking about all humans. We're talking about the animals, the plants, the rivers, the very dust on the ground.
Today we are doing a deep dive into the concept of neo-humanism.
Neohumanism. Sounds, I don't know, kind of futuristic, doesn't it? Like Humanism 2.0 or Humanism with a software patch?
In a way, it is exactly that. It's an upgrade. Our source material today is a fascinating, dense, and incredibly insightful collection of discourses titled The Liberation of Intellect, Neo-Humanism.
By P.R. Sarkar.
Exactly. These were delivered by the philosopher, social thinker, and spiritual teacher P.R. Sarkar between 1981 and 1982.
And let me tell you, having spent the last week reading through this, Sarkar does not pull any punches. This isn't a feel-good, everything-is-fine kind of book. He lays out what he calls a sublime yet uncompromising philosophy.
Uncompromising is the perfect word for it.
He dissects human psychology with a scalpel, tears apart our little tribal loyalties, and then offers a roadmap to something called universalism.
The mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to unpack how we can liberate our intellects from what Sarkar calls dogmas, specifically these traps of geo-sentiment and socio-sentiment, and how to cultivate a love that overflows onto the entire universe.
And I want to do a quick tone check here, because when we talk about traps, dogmas, and mental disease, which is a phrase that comes up a lot in the text, it can sound a bit heavy, it can sound cynical or depressing.
I'm really glad you brought that up. It is critical, yes, it's sharp, it attacks the things we usually hold sacred, but the underlying vibe of this material is wildly, almost aggressively optimistic.
Yes, exactly.
It's not about tearing you down, it's about tearing down the walls around you so you can breathe. The destination is a world of happiness and justice. It's about empowerment.
So here's our roadmap for the next hour or so. First, we're going to look at the mind itself, why we feel stress, and how sentiments hijack our thinking. Then we're going to define these two big villains, geo-sentiment and socio-sentiment.
Then we're going to drop a bit of a bombshell. Why humanism, the thing we usually think is the absolute gold standard of ethics, isn't enough. In fact, why Sarkar argues it can actually be dangerous.
That section is going to be a major aha moment for a lot of listeners. Then we will look at the tools for liberation, which are study, rationality, and conscience.
And finally, we will walk through the solution, a concept called sama-samaja tattva and the ultimate shelter of neo-humanism.
And we are going to talk about how to apply this, because this isn't just theory. We're going to talk about practical steps at the end and how you can actually get involved to build a better world.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with this idea of rhythm. The source material opens with a discussion on devotional sentiment, but it starts with this very relatable observation about stress and mental health.
Yeah, it's a fascinating place to start a high-level philosophy. Sarkar describes the human mind as having a specific inner psychic rhythm. Think of it as your internal beat, your existential flow. It's the speed and vibration at which you are comfortable existing.
Okay, so that's you on the inside, your personal vibe.
Right. But then there's the outer world. The harsh realities, the economy, the society, the traffic, the noise, that has its own rhythm.
And usually, those rhythms do not match at all.
Not even a little bit. When the outer world's rhythm clashes with your inner rhythm, you feel the stress. You feel friction.
The source uses this great analogy. It's like when you're hanging out with a group of people and you just feel off.
Yeah, you're uneasy, you can't relax, you're monitoring everything you say because the vibe is just wrong.
And then you leave that group and go hang out with your close friends and suddenly click. You feel at home, you can breathe. That is the rhythms matching.
So the argument here is that the modern world is essentially that uncomfortable group of people all the time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And when the outer world lacks a philosophical base, when it's just driven by greed or speed or chaos, It leads to mental instability. Sarkar actually points out that this is why we see an increase in psychic disorders. Right, we are advancing intellectually, building skyscrapers and AI, but we haven't adjusted the external world to fit the internal human need for peace and purpose.
So we have this mismatch.
Yeah.
We're fragile, we are stressed. And because we're fragile, we look for security. We look for something to hold on to, a blanket, a shield.
And this is exactly where the sentiments come in. When the mind is unmoored, it grabs onto identity. It grabs onto the nearest solid thing. And usually the nearest solid thing is the ground beneath your feet.
Let's talk about the first trap, geo-sentiment.
Geo-sentiment. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is a sentiment or an emotional bond that grows out of love for your indigenous soil, your country, your region, your hometown.
Which sounds nice, right? Patriotism, loving your hometown. We're taught that's a virtue. We sing anthems about it.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Sarkar argues that while loving your home is perfectly natural, making it the center of your logic is a disaster. It limits your humanity. It creates a mental fence. He talked about how this sentiment expands into geo-patriotism, geo-economics, and even geo-religion.
Geo-religion was the one that made me laugh out loud reading the text. Because when you think about it, it's totally absurd.
It is. The example given is fantastic. Imagine believing that God is universal, right? The creator of the cosmos, the infinite consciousness, but then believing that if a crow dies in a specific holy pilgrimage site,
that crow goes straight to heaven. First class ticket.
But a crow dying 10 miles away in a non-holy city.
Tough luck, bird. No heaven for you.
It sounds funny, but people genuinely believe this, or thinking you have to pray facing a specific direction, as if the infinite consciousness is hanging out in the east. But if you face north, he's just ignoring you.
Exactly. Sarkar points out that east, west, north, south, upwards, downwards, the Supreme encompasses all directions. So why give undue importance to one? That is geo-sentiment infiltrating religion. It values the territory over the universal truth.
And it gets a lot more serious when we move to geoeconomics. This isn't just about praying in the wrong direction. This is about starving people.
This is the mechanism of imperialism.
It absolutely is. The source material uses the example of the jute industry in Dundee, Great Britain versus Bengal in India. This was during the colonial era. Geoeconomics is thinking, I want my region to be rich. Therefore, I will extract resources from your region, crush your local industry, and force you to buy my finished goods.
It's the logic that says, we must have a steel plant in our area, even if there's no iron ore there. It's irrational. It's driven by this blind love for my place at the expense of your place.
And that inevitably leads to conflict. If I value my soil more than yours and I need resources, I'm going to come take yours. Geo-sentiment is the root of war, colonization, and economic disparity. It prepares the mind to accept that we deserve more than them simply because of where we were born.
So that's the trap of the soil.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a bigger trap, or maybe more subtle one, socio-sentiment.
Right. If geo-sentiment is limited by a fence, by geography, socio-sentiment is limited by a group. It's expanding the circle from my land to my people. That could be my family, my caste, my community, my religion, or my nation.
The source gives a hilarious but stinging analogy here. The gang of pickpockets.
Yes, this is brilliant. Imagine a gang of pickpockets. Inside the gang, they have great socio-sentiment. They have unity. One pickpocket steals a wallet with amazing skill, and the rest of the gang applauds.
Bravo. What technique? What sleight of hand?
Exactly. To them, he's a hero. He's a skilled professional.
But to the rest of us outside the group,
He's a criminal. He's a menace.
it really highlights how relative our morality can be when it's based on group loyalty. We excuse the behavior of our guys just because they are our guys.
Sarkar calls this a mental disease. He distinguishes between socio-sentiment minimitis, which is limiting your care to just your nuclear family, and socio-sentiment maximitis, which creates huge groups like nationalism or even internationalism.
Maximitis, it sounds like a medical condition.
It effectively is, in the realm of psychology. The point he drives home is that even if the circle is huge, even if it covers 99% of humanity, if it excludes anyone, if it's based on an us versus them mentality, it's still a disease. It's still a stagnant pool. It creates a barrier.
And this leads us to the biggest aha moment of the text for me. Because usually when people talk about overcoming nationalism or tribalism, they say the answer is humanism. You know, we're all humans, let's just care about humans. But Sarkar says no, that's not the finish line.
This is a critical critique. He argues that general humanism has a fatal flaw. It often only covers humans. It stops at the species barrier. It completely ignores the vital life force throbbing in other creatures.
There's that story about the saint. He was supposedly a great holy man, extremely pious, but he lived on a diet of locusts dipped in honey.
Right.
And the text dryly notes that the saint didn't seem to consider that the locusts had a life force, too. He was a humanist, maybe he was nice to people, but he was a monster to the locusts.
It highlights a deep cruelty in ordinary humanism. We tend to assign value based on utility. This is a concept we really need to drill down on. A cow is useful because it gives milk, so we protect it. A horse is useful for transport, so we feed it. But the moment technology replaces them,
The source mentions that. If we invent synthetic milk, what happens to the cows?
they lose their utility value. And in a purely humanistic framework, if they aren't useful to humans, they don't really matter. They might face extinction or total neglect. Neohumanism steps in and says, no, everything has existential value.
Existential value, meaning it has a right to exist simply because it exists.
Exactly. It has the right to exist because the cosmic entity created it. It doesn't need to justify its existence by being useful to you.
That is a profound shift. It's stopping us from looking at the world as a supermarket where everything is just a product for our consumption.
Yes. But Sarkar goes deeper into humanism. He talks about something called pseudo-humanism. This is even more dangerous than just ignoring animals. This is when people preach peace and human welfare, but secretly they have other intentions.
Preach the gospels of peace, but keep your powder dry.
That's the quote. It's the strategy of intra-humanistic clash. You see this in international politics all the time. A powerful nation sees a starving region. They rush in with aid and literacy drives. It looks like humanism. It looks like sheer kindness. But the underlying motive is to turn that region into a satellite market.
You feed them so they can work for you. You teach them your language so they can buy your products and read your propaganda.
It's exploitation wearing a mask of charity. That is pseudo-humanism. And Sarkar warns that because ordinary humanism lacks a spiritual, universal base, it's very easy for it to slide into this pseudo-humanism. It's unstable. It needs a firmer foundation.
So we're surrounded by traps. Geo-sentiment makes us fight for land. Socio-sentiment makes us fight for our tribe. Humanism makes us exploit nature and even other humans under the guise of charity. It feels a bit overwhelming. How do we break out? What are the weapons we have?
The text gives us a very specific toolkit. The first weapon is rationalistic mentality.
Rationality, but not just being smart.
Right. No, it's about discrimination, distinguishing between proper and improper. Sarkar contrasts sentiment with rationality. Sentiment is like a horse running blindly. You see something you like and you just run after it. You don't look left or right.
Like an animal. The text uses the example of a bird seeing rice. It sees the rice, it wants the rice, it flies down, snap, it's caught in a net.
Because the bird relied entirely on instinct and sentiment. It didn't pause to ask, why is there rice in the middle of this desolate woods? Where did it come from? Oh, look, there are ropes in a net here. That pausing, that questioning, that is rationality. Humans have the capacity for logic. We can see the net, but often we choose to be like the bird. We let our geo-sentiment or socio-sentiment drive us right toward the bait.
So to develop this rationality, the source says we need study.
Yes, patha and svadhyaya. Intellectual study and spiritual study. We need to be informed. You can't make logical decisions if you're ignorant.
And I love that there's always but in this, text study isn't foolproof.
No, it's not. There are two main defects in relying solely on study. One is defects due to ignorance. You might be studying the wrong things, or your teacher might be wrong. The other is defects due to time.
The geography book example.
It's a classic. You study a book that says Allahabad is the capital of the province. You memorize it, you're a good student. But 10 years later, the capital moves to Lucknow. If you cling to your book, you are now wrong. Facts change, the world evolves. So book knowledge alone can become a dogma if you aren't constantly updating and analyzing it.
So study gives us the raw data, but it's not the decision maker, which leads us to the ultimate tool, the awakened conscience, or viveka.
This is the core formula for the liberation of intellect. Sarkar breaks it down into a very clear process. Step 1, study, get the facts. Step 2, analyze. Look at the positive side and the negative side. Weigh the pros and cons. Step 3, make a logical decision. This is called siddhanta.
But you don't stop there.
No, because you can make a logical decision that is essentially evil. A thief can logically plan a bank robbery. It's highly rational, but it's not good. So the final crucial step is verification. You ask, does this decision contribute to human welfare? Does it help the collective? Is it blissful for all?
And that final yes or no switch, that is conscience.
Precisely. That is viveka. It's logic filtered through universal love. If you just have logic, you might become a cunning exploiter. If you just have love, you might be a sentimental fool. You need both. You need a rationalistic mentality guided by conscience.
I'll apply this to the social reality the text discusses. Because Sarkar doesn't just keep this abstract. He talks about how exploitation actually works in the real world and how we need this conscience to spot it.
He introduces a concept called sama-samaja tattva, which translates to the principle of social equality. It's the realization that everyone has the right to survive and thrive.
He uses this great metaphor: the cart should be placed behind the horse.
Right. People often talk about religion or virtue or high philosophy. That's the cart. But the horse is the physical reality. Food, clothes, shelter, medical care. You cannot expect people to be spiritual if they're starving. Sama-samaja tattva says we must ensure the physical basics for everyone first. That is the absolute foundation.
But there are forces trying to stop that. And the text identifies psychoeconomic exploitation as a major weapon. This isn't just stealing money, it's stealing dignity.
It's insidious. The exploiters inject an inferiority complex into the minds of the people they want to exploit. If I can make you feel small, stupid, or backward, I don't even need to use an army to control you. You will control yourself.
The example of language and dress is so powerful here. The text mentions how colonial powers would reserve train compartments for people in European dress, or how they make the local language seem vernacular or low class.
Exactly. You put up a signboard. The colonial language is big and bold at the top. The local language is small and at the bottom. Subconsciously, every time a local person looks at that sign, they learn, I am small, they are big. This paralyzes the cultural backbone of a people. It makes them feel grateful for being exploited.
This is what creates pseudo-culture.
Yes, you strip away a people's real culture, their music, their literature, their values, and you replace it with vulgar entertainment. Cheap movies, mindless dramas. The text says this paralyzes the cultural backbone. If you are addicted to cheap entertainment, you aren't thinking about revolution. You aren't analyzing your exploitation.
And speaking of revolution, the text has a warning about vocal revolutionaries.
Oh, yes. The human chameleons.
I love that phrase, human chameleons.
It perfectly describes people who give thunderous speeches against injustice. They shout about equality. But in private, they are reinforcing the exact same systems. They are the politician who rails against the caste system on stage, but absolutely refuses to let his daughter marry outside their caste.
Or the leader who switches from nationalism to communism to communalism just to stay in power. They change their sentiment, like a chameleon changes color.
And Sarkar says that rationalistic mentality is the only way to spot them. You have to watch their actions, not just listen to their words. You have to ask, is this person actually moving us towards sama-samaja tattva, or are they just manipulating our emotions?
So we've identified the problem sentiments and exploitation. We've identified the tools, rationality, and conscience. Now, what is the ultimate solution? The text introduces this term, proto-psycho-spirituality.
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is. Let's break it down.
Proto means it's in the early stages, it's flickering. Psycho-spirituality means the mind moving toward the spirit. Sarkar uses the analogy of running.
Right. Standing on a field isn't running, you have to move.
Exactly. Proto-psycho-spirituality is a dynamic state. It's the mind actively fighting against dogma, actively moving toward a universal view. It's not just sitting in meditation, it's a warrior-like stance against narrowness.
And this movement leads us to the ultimate shelter, Neohumanism.
Neohumanism is described as the expansion of humanism into universalism. It's protecting your inner asset, that devotional love, by fencing it with a rational philosophy. It describes 3 stages of implementation, which I think provides a really practical guide for how this change actually happens.
Walk us through those 3 stages.
The first is spirituality as a cult. And by cult, he means culture or practice, not a scary group. This is the individual practice. Introversion, meditation, improving your own body and mind. You fix yourself so you can serve others.
Okay, that makes sense. Step 2.
Spirituality, in essence, this is bigger. This is about changing the collective mind. It's about introducing a new wave of thought into the entire human race. We have to change the intellectual climate of the planet so that exploitation becomes impossible. We rewrite the software of society.
On to the final stage.
Spirituality is a mission. This is the highest goal. It's when the individual merges their existence with the cosmic existence. You don't just do good, you become the flow of universal good. You see every grain of dust, every star, every person as part of yourself.
The text gets incredibly high energy here. It feels like a call to arms, but for the soul.
It is. It's a call to end the despair of modern humanity. Sarkar shares that beautiful anecdote about the village man in Purulia.
I love that story. Sarkar asks this simple villager if he can carry a really heavy bag.
And the man says, "Why not? Certainly I can."
Why not? That's the attitude.
That is the neo-humanist spirit. We look at poverty, we look at war, we look at environmental destruction, and instead of saying, "Oh, it's too big," we say, "Why not? Certainly we can fix this." It's an attitude of invincibility.
He also brings it back to devotion with the analogy of the color festival, Dolyatra.
Yes. In the festival, people throw colored powder on each other. But the deeper meaning is offering the colors of your mind, your prejudices, your vices, your narrow identities to the supreme. You give up your color to become colorless, to become pure, to become universal.
And that leads to universal justice. Not the lopsided justice we have now, where we praise a dead soldier but let his widow starve, but a justice that covers the animate and the inanimate, a justice that speaks for the trees as loudly as it speaks for the people.
That is the vision. A world where logic and love are not enemies but partners, where we use our sharpest intellect to protect our tenderest devotion.
So let's recap this journey. We started with the trap. Our minds are hijacked by geo-sentiments, love for land, and socio-sentiments, love for a tribe. These lead to conflict, imperialism, and the mental disease of exclusion.
We saw that ordinary humanism isn't enough because it leaves out the natural world and is easily corrupted into pseudo-humanism, which is exploitation disguised as charity.
We learn the tools: rationalistic mentality and conscience. We have to study, analyze, decide, and verify for welfare. We have to spot the vocal revolutionaries and the pseudo-culture that tries to keep us small.
And finally, the solution is neo-humanism, expanding our circle to include the entire universe, moving from spirituality as a practice to spirituality as a mission.
So what does this mean for you, the listener? Why should you care?
Because this isn't just theory. This is a manual for how to be a truly free human being in a world that wants to put you in a box. It's a challenge to expand your heart until there is no them left, only us.
If you are fired up by this, if you're thinking, okay, certainly I can come it in, then there are practical steps you can take. This philosophy isn't just about thinking, it's about doing.
Absolutely. To make this world a better place for all to live with happiness and justice, know more about Prout, progressive utilization theory.
Join a Prout study circle. Get together with others, study these ideas, debate them, and sharpen your rationalistic mentality.
And also join our YouTube channel, Sadvipres Movement. Connect with others who are asking these big questions.
I want to leave you with one final thought from the text. It describes the future as a crimson dawn. It acknowledges that there is darkness now, there's exploitation. There are people who actually prefer the darkness because it hides their actions.
But our duty is clear. The text says we have come to the world to perform great deeds. Even if someone says darkness is good for me, we must tell them, all right, but just once. Come and see the light. It is even better.
The light is better. Thank you for diving deep with us today.
Keep expanding your mind.
See you next time.